welcome. I'm Daniel G. Garza, and this is another episode of Putting Together Conversations. Welcome to the show. I want to welcome everybody watching us on Facebook. Thank you for joining us. All our friends on LinkedIn, thank you for being part of the show. All our friends on Twitter, would you do us a favor and retweet the show so other people can check it out with you? And for our friends on YouTube, do us a favor. You scroll down, hit that subscribe button, and that way you can be part of the show. Remember to hit the notification button because that'll give you an opportunity to catch up on every show we have during the week. Remember, we have Christian and Daniel show, the Card Devo, Putting Together Conversations, and then Monday to Friday you can catch me on TikTok in the mornings for Breakfast with the Comadres, and all those shows are on YouTube, so make sure you follow us and check out that. This week, I'm really excited. This person is somebody, it's one of those people that I usually say, when I stalk my guest, this is one of those people that I found him, and I'll tell you where I found him in a minute. His name is Gustavo Hernandez. He is a poet. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Gustavo Hernandez is the author of poetry collection Flower Garden First, from Moon Type Press. The Micro-Chapbook formed his arms, which was part of the 2020 Ghost City Press Summer Micro-Chapbook series. Gustavo holds a degree in creative writing from California State University, Long Beach, and his poems have been published in Read, Acentos Review, and Sonora Review, along with other publications. He was born in Jalisco, Mexico, and lives in Southern California. So we've got more. Let me bring him on. Gustavo. Hola, Gustavo. ¿Cómo estás?
Hi, bien. How are you?
I'm doing good. So happy to have you here. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. For those of you that follow the show, how I met Gustavo, I found him. I pulled him out of nowhere. I saw you in Instant Magazine. I read an article about you, and I was kind of like, Mexican born, lives in the States. Like there was always some similarities. I'm like, let me go check this guy out, see what it's about. And then I found some of your poems, and I was like, I've got to have this guy on the show. And I sent him a message on Instagram, and he was so kind to respond. And this was back in March. It took us till like the end of July to get you on the show. So I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So how are you doing? What's going on?
Fine. I'm doing well. The summer's going by really quickly for me. I don't know if it's like that for everyone, but it's just been a blur.
I feel like since March of last year, it started off like, a ver qué pasa, let's see where this is going, let's see what's happening. And then right after like July for me, it's a blur. Like this last year, I know I did stuff because I have shows online and they're posted. And Facebook keeps sending me memories of the last year. So I know I did things. I don't remember a lot of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does make sense. I think that's kind of like my experience too. It just seems like, I don't know. I mean, and social media is good for for a lot of things, bad for a lot of things. But one of the things that it's good for is to kind of remind ourselves, where we were with those like memories that pop up, or just scrolling through your own feed or whatever. And yeah, like I posted a lot of selfies last year.
For those of you watching, I'm going to put up his website, but go check out his Instagram. It's like, I feel like you get to know you really well on Instagram.
Yeah, it's kind of become like my preferred social media account. I don't know. It just works for me. I think it's fun.
I have to comment on how shy you are on Instagram. So just for everybody to go.
On how what?
How shy you are.
I am extremely shy. You hardly see anything. It's
no.
Yeah, you just maybe like see part of my face.
It's like crosses and
oh yes, right? Yeah. Also, please do not tell my mom I have an Instagram. Thanks a lot.
If you tell, we'll know who you are. So
yes, I know.
Well, I'm so excited to hear about your story. And I'm going to say this before we start because I read your book, and I have a couple of my favorites. Well, I had several, but I only picked two of my favorites, and I'll tell you a little later. But in the pre-production meeting, when Christian was chatting, we were talking about like connecting to somebody and I've read poetry. I'm 50 years old. I do read, people. I do read. So I've read poetry over the years, and sometimes you find something you're like, oh, that's nice, or oh, that's heartfelt. But there have been very few poets, you actually moving up to the top of the list, that there is so much similarities again in the Mexicano, uh, American race or United States race, and that your words and the way that you mix the English and the Spanish into it, like that's the way I talk. And when in one of the poems, and I'm gonna bring it up a little bit, but when you said accordion, I was like, dude, that's like you're in my family, like you. Okay, I'm not gonna say I cried, but there was a little, just a dramatic tear that
Just
fell.
one.
Uno nomás, es nomás. Anyway, but let's hear more of your story. So, Gustavo Hernandez, tell us how you put it together.
Um, well, so like you said, I was born in Mexico, in Jalisco, in a little rancho that's about like 45 minutes south of Guadalajara. And my family immigrated here to the US in 1985. I was 6. Um, and yeah, so I grew up in Santana, California, which is, Southern California. Um, for anyone who is not from around here, it's right next door to Anaheim, pretty much where Disneyland is. So just to kind of place you, which is, I do that a lot. I like to like place people geographically. Um, so yeah, so I grew up here and I started writing um, pretty early in life in one way or another. So I always tell people, and everyone who's like followed me for any significant amount of time knows the story of how, like, when I was in third grade, I used to write poems for my classmates and they'd pay me in, like, He-Man accessories or Ninja Turtle stickers or whatever. Um, and so, yeah, so I've always sort of been writing in my 20s. I played music. Like, there was a big, um, I guess, local scenes popping up everywhere because of just like indie rock stuff. And so I played music in my 20s, and that was sort of my creative outlet. And then when the local scene started dying down, which was, I think, like in 2008 with the market crash, like gas started being really expensive. People weren't paying. So the bigger bands weren't touring. And as a result, a lot of like the local people, we weren't getting opening slots anymore because the big bands weren't coming around. Um, so that sort of came to its natural end. And I struggled for a little while trying to like figure out what I wanted to do because I've always been someone who has had the need to express myself somehow, right? And I kind of I looked into painting and I did that for a tiny little bit, but didn't take any formal classes. I wasn't like a natural or anything. Um, and I was like, no, that's not really for me. So then I went back to school in 2014 and I took a creative writing class. It was a short story class, actually, like short fiction. And I was like, I should have done this before. I should have really paid more attention and kept up with my reading. I was a big reader in elementary school and junior high and high school, but it sort of tapered off. And yeah, that class made me realize this is kind of, I think, where you belong. So let's figure out what we want to do. And after that creative writing class, I took a creative writing class that was it was a mixture of forms. So like you have poetry, you had fiction, a nonfiction, and when I wrote a poem for that class, the professor that was teaching the class was like, this is good. Like, you should try publishing it. And I thought, he's probably just like, oh, he's the old guy in class. Like, let's make him feel good so the kids won't pick on him anymore. um, but no, then I thought, well, maybe. And I sent out my first poem to, gosh, I'm so bad. I don't remember the journal's name anymore. They're no longer around, but they were kind enough to to pick up the first thing I sent out. I sent out a poem and they were like, yes, we'll publish this. And I thought, I got lucky, right? So then I sent out another packet of poems, and that journal ended up publishing, I think, 4 poems that I sent out. And I was like, okay, so I'm 2 for 2. Like, this is a good sign. And then, I got like 16 rejections. And then like a year later or whatever, I published another poem, and I just kept going. And that's sort of how it started.
So the persistence, I think that's one of the things, like one of the first things that I'm catching on from the story is like, especially when you're sending out your work, like it's not always going to be, just because they said yes in the first couple of times doesn't mean everything else you write is a home run. How did you keep motivated to keep sending in yourself?
I think that those first 2 acceptances definitely helped, because I thought, well, if someone likes it, then there must be someone else out there who may, connect with what I'm writing. And so I think that was a big help, and not everyone has that experience. Like, I have, a lot of poet friends that are like, oh yeah, I got rejected like 30 times before I got my first acceptance. So I just got lucky that the person that put their eyes on that first piece identified with it. Because it isn't, if you send out and you get rejected, it doesn't mean your work is bad. It just means that the right person didn't read it, right? And again, it's not their fault. It's not your fault. It's just finding the right pair of eyes for it. And so I think hearing other people tell me their stories about publishing and sort of getting a grip on what publishing is, that I think is what kept me hopeful during those times when the poems were not, necessarily being accepted all the time.
We have a first question on the board for you. Gustavo, do you feel your love of reading enhanced your ability to write poetry through actively using and exercising your imagination? That's a long question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Definitely. I think that we're all good at stuff, right? I mean, I don't know, I'm a big believer that everyone has their inherent talents. And that doesn't mean that if you're not an excellent, like, graphic artist at the beginning, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be one later or whatever. But I don't know, I just think we all come with like little microchips already, that it's like, okay, well, here's the, the reading, right? And here's the writing ability. And I always tell people that I feel like someone, I mean, just like bloodlines, you think about bloodlines and you think about it in sort of like a, hazy, romanticized way. But I'm like, maybe there was someone in the past who, one of my ancestors was like, hey, let's give this kid this ability. I think it'll help him, right? But reading definitely, I think it strengthens you. Every book I read, even to this day, every novel I read, every poem I read, I think it makes me a better listener and a better reader, and also as a result a better writer, because I don't know, you figure out stuff you like and what you don't, and you sort of let the things you do like strengthen you. So yeah, I mean, reading definitely, it's
We have a follow-up to that question. Do you find you have the ability to convert rejection into motivation to keep working, and perhaps even harder to get your art out there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know not everyone is this way, but for me, um, I've always been that way, like through my whole life. If I knock on a door and that door doesn't open, it just makes me want to figure out why, and to keep going and pursuing it. Like, I mean, I struggled with like self-esteem issues my whole life, right? Like, as a kid, there's just a lot of stuff that sort of sometimes pushes you down. But for me, giving up was never an option, no matter what I was trying to do. It was the same thing with music. I'd never touched a guitar until I was like 18, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to play a show. Like, I'm going to go and I'm going to make an album, and I'm going to have fun with it and meet people. And man, I don't know, there's just something in me that's like, I don't care. And it's not about, when I look back on like my time playing music, I don't look back at it and be like, oh, I didn't make it, like no one knows who I am, whatever. I'm like, no, I did. I played shows. I got over my nervousness of being in front of people. I mean, I was like painfully, sometimes just painfully shy with, and even though that's not who I am, I think certain circumstances sort of made me feel like I should be that way. Part of it, I think, is just being an immigrant in general. Like you come to some place and you're a little kid and you don't know anything. You don't know how this place works. You don't know the language. I think some people kind of rise above it in one way, which is just like, I don't care. I'm gonna just do who I am and to just do me and it's gonna be fine. But I wasn't that way. I was sort of like, oh man, I'm scared. Like this is scary, you know? And I think that kind of hampered me um, for a good long time to where I couldn't even like get in front of people without like shaking, you know, I was just so nervous. And but then again, like how do you reconcile that kid with the guy who was getting up at like dive bars by himself with a guitar and just telling all kinds of things about him, or the guy who's writing poetry now and is putting himself on the page? And I mean, you've read my stuff. Like I don't think I pull any punches. I'm just like, this is who I am and this is what I want to say. And go ahead and read it if you want, and that's okay with me, you know?
It's very raw, and I think because I'll say it again because I see. It's not until I've gotten older that I've understood the whole concept of seeing yourself and like people in media but I don't want to blow smoke up your butt or anything, but really, it's not until I read your book that I was like, I finally see somebody writing things that I can associate with. And that was really interesting. That was really cool. But before I continue, I want to remind everybody you're watching Put Together Conversations. My guest today is poet Gustavo Hernandez, and we're talking about persistence, getting up and doing things, and overcoming your shyness. We have another question here for you before I ask my question. Where do you source your ambition from? Is it from your parents, siblings, or just a gift from your higher power? Actually, that's kind of tied in with the question I was going to ask, so I'm glad somebody else asked it.
Yeah. I think part of it is definitely from my parents and from my siblings. I mean, I think about my dad and my mom and the things that they went through to give us the life that they thought would be, full of, I don't know, more prosperity, more advantages. Um, my dad my dad worked from like the age of 7, right, to help his mom. He was the product of a single parent home. Like his mom, um, I mean, she was poor. She sometimes didn't even know where she was going to get her next meal for her kids. And my dad, at 7 years old, was herding cattle, right, to help her. And um, when he came to the U.S. for the first time, he came as part of the Bracero program, like the tail end of the Bracero program. And for those of you who don't know, it was like a work exchange program between the U.S. and Mexico. And, you could do a lot of reading on that. It's super problematic. And but for my dad, it was like that was where his life sort of changed, right? And he used to tell me stories like how people used to wait at the border, um, or in these cities to see if they were going to be picked to come to the U.S. to work. And he's like, there were people there who were hungry, people there who had been waiting for months. And I think about my dad there, and it's always given me strength. I'm like, whatever it is that you're going through right now, like think of your dad in that situation and not knowing what was going to happen, being far away from home and saying, you know what, I'm still going to do this, right? And my mom back home too, with her kids and having to take care of the household herself. And I mean, it's just that's a big thing. And my siblings, again, we all have our struggles, and I think it's definitely from them. But I also just feel something in me, like, again, we talk about inheritance and bloodlines and stuff, and I don't know, I mean, I'm very connected to that part of myself, and I can't exactly say it comes from 100% from this or that. I think it's just a combo. But I don't know, there's something in the way my engine was built, I think, that
But
Just
again, another similarity. My dad, although my dad was born in Texas, they moved to Mexico when he was little. My grandfather was a dairy farmer, so my dad was a milkman since he was a kid. And but my dad talks about coming to the States because even though he's in the U.S., they saw him as a Mexicano. So he would go. He was part of the railroad uh, com- companies in Michigan in the cold. He was part of digging ditches for irrigation here in California, in Florida. So he traveled a lot of times, and he never really got to do what he wanted because he had to send money back. Um, so I think about that sometimes, and I'm like, I am so blessed and fortunate to be able to do what I want to do. But it's because I think about how he struggled, and I'm like, I don't like in his honor, I don't want to struggle that way. So I'm going to do what feels right to me. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense. And I think that yeah, with my dad too, and this is covered in one of the poems. My dad's dream was always for, one of us to like, or all his kids to not have to be out in the sun, to not have to be doing physical labor. And so that was like his dream. And, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that because sometimes, and this is something that I hear that I understand where it's coming from, but it still kind of bugs me. Like people saying, oh, my dad could have been this, my dad could have been that. And it's like, you know what? Um, my dad was a great man. And just because he didn't go to college, just because he didn't do this or do that, it doesn't mean that he wasn't, that I'm better than him. It's like, I'm not. I'll never be the man my dad was, you know? And so, um, yeah, I think it's important. And I like what you said about, you're doing sort of like the best that you can for you, right? And I think our situations are definitely different because of the lives that we lead now, and the privileges we have, right? Because of our parents' struggles. And I just think that you have to honor that, right? And be mindful of it. That this wasn't owed to you. This didn't just materialize out of nothing. The fact that we are here and that we are comfortable and that we're doing what we want to do, that we have the bandwidth to do it, is a direct reflection of their struggles, and
Yep.
those nights where they didn't really know what was gonna happen next.
There are there's some very definite things that I've learned from my father, and we're moving away from the conversation a bit. Like I learned from both my parents. I learned the love of work. I watched them, and I learned that they loved having a purpose in life, and that gave me a love for working. I'm definitely a workaholic, and I do it, but I do it because I love what I do, everything I do. Second, my dad taught me the importance of being a good friend and showing up for people, even when there was nothing there for you in the end. You were just there to push them along in the direction that they needed to go, and to be responsible for myself. My dad took responsibility whenever he made a mistake. He was good about saying, you know what, I messed up. Like I messed up. I'm human. I messed up. Either you're going to forgive me or you're not. But I'm not going to hold on to that anymore. Like I'm letting it go. And I think a lot of those things. And the hem for attention. I will give my dad I will give that to my dad. He's a ham, and I learned how to be a ham. That's why I have 3 shows on the air because I love being on camera. Okay, well, que no, sí. Before we move on, I want to remind everybody you're watching Put It Together Conversations. I'm your host, Daniel G. Garza. My guest today is poet Gustavo Hernandez, and we're talking about learning from our families, tapping into our true selves to find our gifts. And I'm hoping that because I read the book, and I would love to hear it from you. Is there from the book, and I do have it, folks. I got one of the signed copies, and I was so excited when I got it because you can't see it. I promise it's signed. Um, but is there one of the shorter ones, maybe for time's sake, that you could read for us if you don't
Sure.
mind?
Yeah, no, not at all.
That's pretty. Por favor.
um, I'll read one of the tiny ones, and I think this one kind of speaks to what we were talking about.
Una probadita, nomás
Una
para que vean.
probadita, una probadita. And it's called Santana 1995. I may have been surrounded by the city's losses, maybe a morning drawn in dead carburetors or the sad hungover math of early July. But all around us, our fathers had become small proprietors. 16 and the hills and roads of America were said to be disorganized only because they were, on the whole, open. At the bus stop, in plaid cotton shorts and a Tori Amos t-shirt, palming a high school collage of black and white Versace ads, hungry and buoyant, I was a probable answer. I'd been trained to stare holes into the future.
No voy a llorar. Cállate, Gustavo. Thank you for doing that. I wanted, like, I was gonna be brave enough. I'm like, can I read one of your poems? But I was like, no, let me let him do it. Let me let him do it. There was another comment when we were talking about. Christian says, I feel the same way about my mother. She worked so hard to make sure I had a life that was only a dream to her. Yeah, I think that's why I don't know about everybody out there, but that's why I do that. My mom passed away last year, and when she passed, I was like, okay, from this point on, I am going to be, I'm going to carry the dreams that you didn't get to do. I don't know what her dreams were. She never shared them, but I'm putting dreams into her memory, and I'm going to chase it after. And I knew Christian's mom for a short time, so he says, well, about your mom. I'm going to tell you the two that brought. Like, I was like, wow, this is really. I marked them good. I got the sticker. Um, Flor de Albacar was one of them. That's one of my favorite ones. And then Winter Cumbia with Brothers and Sisters. I read this on one of those nights that I was thinking about my mom and my two sisters, because one of my sisters lives in Monterrey, in Mexico, and the other one lives in South Texas. So we're not together, and I wasn't there for the funeral. But when I read this, and talked about the memories, I mean, obviously we don't know. That's my next question. I was gonna, like, we never really know what the author's intention is when they write, but I feel like it's always about the feelings that you bring out of your readers, right? I mean, I'm gonna guess that. But this is the one where you say, Christian laughs at me because I need my glasses. I have my abuelita glasses. The last part of this poem says, tonight, it's by sharing the names of the songs playing on the two loudspeaker bolted to the white tile of these places. The times an accordion unexpectedly completes a phrase and calls out like a father in a sundown of reeds. I was like, dude, it's like listening to a corrido. The only thing that it reminded me of was, not the only thing, but one of the things that reminded me of, when my grandfather passed away, I was about 18, and we were in Monterrey, and we had gone out to eat afterwards to this little taqueria, and they had music playing, and I never really knew my grandfather, but he was a pretty wise man. But as we're talking about him, it's Monterrey, it's un rancho, they're playing rancheras and cumbias on the speaker, on the music, on the radio, whatever. And I remember as we talked about him, and we were like, "Salud, al abuelo," and the accordion just like does one of the little accordion. For people who don't know, like the Jano rancheras, there's always an accordion there. And I remember just like we all started crying because it was just like so symbolic. So when I read that poem and I saw that part, I was like, that's like every Latino family holding on to memories. I don't know. Does that make sense? Like,
No, it does. Yeah, thank you. That poem, the Winter Cumbia, is probably one of my favorite poems that I've written. It came to me kind of fast, which is, I like when poems do that, because when you look back at them later, it almost feels like you didn't write them. So I feel like those are always, they end up being my favorites because they sort of give me that feeling that I get when I read a poem by someone else, where I'm like, oh, I like this. I identify with it. Because, yeah, I mean, that one, I remember I was walking in one morning I just decided to go out on a walk, and I had my headphones in, and I started thinking about like just music, right? And my dad, and I got the idea. I was like, okay, so I want to write a song a poem has that has something to do with like my dad's love of music, right? And how it sort of touches us, right? And how it's affected my brother and my sister and me and my whole family. And I thought about it for like maybe a day, just kind of rolling stuff around in my head. And then when I sat down to write it, it came really fast. And um, yeah, I just think that that was one of the ways that we really remember my dad now is through the music that he listened to. A couple of songs uh, I hadn't really heard since my dad passed, right? And last year I finally was able to listen to them, and it was like having him there. I just got all these memories of being in his truck and listening to those songs over and over. Like he had his favorites, right? And and it was such a beautiful way to connect with him that I didn't have right away. Um, and I think there was a reason for that. You know, you do your grieving, and um, the way that it's supposed to happen. Like and I think that the music part came at the right time. It was like my dad was like, "No, you're gonna need this, in a little bit. So let's not do that right away. But when the moment comes, you'll it'll be there for you."
Christian is asking us what a corrido is. A corrido, for those of you that are watching this, is basically uh, translated to country music, the legend of when they sing about a certain outlaw. Um, those are corridos. Those would be the version of a corrido. Usually, corridos are songs that are written for a certain person. It used to be that it was like some soldier or some captain of some army. But then over the years, they've kind of graduated to outlaws, more outlaws, and narcos. And so you can find, if you, Corridos, corridos. If you Google corridos, if you go on YouTube, you will find an endless array. And most corridos have an accordion in there. And it's just, but the accordion, I'm going to be stuck on that word for a long time. But es que el acordeón en rancheras, en cumbias, en corridos, it's its own voice. It has its own solo and songs, and it just brings that stuff. Um, now, I went through the book, but am I? Do you write in Spanish as well?
I think, well, my first language, of course, is Spanish, but my strongest language is English. Um, and so what ends up happening, it's not like uh, I don't know. I mean, I guess there was never really a question as to whether I was going to be a primarily like English writer or a writer who writes in Spanish, just because of that fact that my English is so much stronger than my Spanish, and my Spanish is like the older I get, the more it fades, right? I mean, I still have it. My parents, my mom doesn't speak English at all. My dad spoke very limited English. And so we just we spoke Spanish at home to them primarily, but um, I just think that like Spanish in my writing is what it is in my life now, where it shows up when I need it, right? Um, but yeah, but I mean, primarily I write in English, and then if Spanish needs to be there, then it's there.
Yeah, there's again for everybody. I'm gonna flash the book up right after you go to see it. This is the book that we're talking about at the moment, which is Flower Grand First. Where does the title come from?
The title comes from a poem called Carmen, and one of my well, I my book has been through a lot. Like it was picked up by a publisher in 2019, and then that publisher closed its doors, and so it was like, oh, I guess I don't have a book coming out. But very quickly, luckily, a couple of publishers reached out to me, and I ended up publishing with Moontide Press. But the first publisher, one of the editors was like, this needs to be the title of your book. And I loved it. Like from the beginning, when he picked it out from that poem, I was like, yeah, of course that's the title. Like Flower, Grand, and First are big streets in Santana. They're, big thoroughfares. And a lot of cities have a Flower, a Grand, and a First. And so I thought these streets mean a lot to me personally, but there's also this universal aspect where anyone who's from, a bigger city is going to be like, oh yeah, we have a Grand, avenue, or, First Street or Flower. So yeah, I just thought it was really charged, like those three words. And also, when I think about the book that's divided into 3 sections, those words frame those sections perfectly in my mind, right? Like you have the first section, which is more of the childhood poems. So Flower, right? Like you're growing, and then Grand is the middle section, and those poems focus more on my 20s and early 30s, and coming into being an adult, right, and a gay man. And so there's always that aggrandizement, that self-aggrandizement that you have when you're in your 20s and you think you're invincible, and so that I think was good. And then First is the last section, and when I think First, I think of my dad, right? Like he, before me, there was him, and so to me, I think of him as like the first, right?
I have another question on the board. This is David Gonzalez, a longtime follower of the show. He says, I would be curious to know when you were a child writing poetry, did the other kids bully you? And if yes, do you write about that experience, or were your classmates supportive?
Surprisingly, I think they didn't. I can't remember being bullied for that. I think I had the opposite experience. Like I said, like some kids would pay me to write poems for their little girlfriends, and so that was like the elementary school thing where I was writing, and they were like, oh yeah, Gus, yeah, of course, like you write stuff. And so it was just it wasn't a big deal. I was, you're bullied for other stuff, of course, especially like being a gay kid, every once in a while, but it was never specifically about the writing. Um, I think that would have hurt, a lot too, if they'd been like, your writing's not good, this line
Yeah.
is not strong. Um,
Take your poem and give me my
yeah,
quarter back.
get the
Okay, so I'm
poems out
curious,
of
how much did
here.
you charge for a poem when you were a kid?
What was that?
How much did you charge for the poems when you were a kid?
Well, it was a bartering system. So it was, the stickers. I remember there was this girl who made these handmade notebooks, and I got one of those. I don't remember if I wrote the poem for her or I bartered with some other kid who got the notebook from her. I don't know. But anyway, so that,
Wow.
and then in high school, and I don't think I've ever like really talked about this before, but right now that question popped up, this just like came into my head. When I was in high school, I was taking a math class, right? And our teacher was this man. His name was Mr. Murphy. He was an ex-Marine, and there was like this, just like these legends about him. Like, yeah, Mr. Murphy once threw a kid out the window, right? He did this, he did that. He's so tough. He's so weird, and just it turned out he was tough and he was weird and he was magnificent. Like that man was awesome. And so he had this thing where if you got up in class and said an inspirational phrase at the beginning of class, he'd give you extra credit. And so at that point, I was pretty shy. And in that class, it was like, for some reason, there were a lot of kids I didn't know. And so one day I remember just like writing this, it was probably like some Hallmark, inspirational thing. And I wish I remembered what it was. But one day, after months of being in his class, I got up and I read that in front of the whole class, and everyone was speechless. They were like, "Who? First of all, who is this kid? Like, we've never seen. Is he in this class? Like, who is this guy?" And yeah, I just remember Murphy's just like jaw dropping, like, "What? Like, you really just read for a minute? Like, what is happening?" And so all of the kids, all of the guys, like we had a bunch of guys from the football team in that class for some reason. They were so supportive. They were like just really sweet about it. So I don't know. I guess I should have known then that that was where like my power was, right?
Yeah. I wonder if, I'm sure they probably do, like have these memories of you. Like there was this kid, and he wrote a book now. Like he has a book. So here he is. Okay, so we have a couple more questions. This really ties into what we were just talking about kids, because it says, what guidance would you give the younger generation who have been raised in a very digital, prepackaged world to enhance their ability to express their authentic selves?
Um, I think that my advice would just be to dig deep, you know? I think that even though today's world, yeah, there's a lot of that pre-packaging stuff going on. I hope that that's not something that is getting to everyone, right? Like you have to be this type of influencer, you have to be a TikTok person, you have to be this and that. Yeah, the only thing I would say is just dig deep because, and it's not just about you. Like look into your past, look at your parents. What are they into? What are they like? And I think that this is something that I tell people who have come to me for like writing advice or whatever, like how do you write a poem that's you? And I always just tell them, just tell everyone what you had for breakfast. Like, and it's just the little tiny things that you think are insignificant or you may think that way. That's what makes you you. And if you just write genuinely from that space and not worry too much about what are other people going to think, I think that the pieces will fall into place.
Yeah. So we have another question that ties to what you were just saying. Do you fear that artists are a dying breed due to our digital age where anything can be made a virtual reality instead of imagining as Gen X and older generations had to do? That's a long question there for you.
Uh, I don't know. I actually don't. I don't know if because there are a lot of people who are being super creative, um, in these new realms of like social media and digital stuff. So I don't think that it's ever going to be we're ever going to be a dying breed. I just think maybe we're evolving, like Pokemon. Or no, what were those other ones that Digimon, the ones that that are like, I'm a dinosaur, and then it's like, no, now I'm a refrigerator.
Transformers.
Yeah, like Transformers.
I think in that aspect, I mean, I still buy the books whenever I'm having an author or somebody who's published something, and they're like, "Would you like a book, or can we send you a digital?" I'm always like, "No, send me. I want, I want something that I can take to bed, and like right before I go to bed, I can scan through something or read a chapter
Yeah.
or grab something." That's how I've learned stuff, and you're so right about there is this cookie cutter version of anything. I think anything in life has a cookie cutter version, and there is. And Christian is really good about reminding me sometimes that when I want to veer outside of my lane and try what everybody else is trying, um, it's like stick to what you do, and you do it good. Like you might not have the millions of followers that other people have because they're doing everything everybody else is doing, but you have longevity. And I do. I have to say, I have some very loyal audience. I'm not going to lump fans because I don't know if it sounds weird, but people who supporters, people who support my work. David Gonzalez, who just asked the question, has been following my career since I launched my podcast back in 2012. And every time I change something, he's right there with me, and he's always so he really. I just got chills saying that. he's really one of the people that will send me a message sometimes like, hey, this guest was awesome. And I'm like, gotta get more of those guests for David because David's following me. Who, because you fit so many different squares. Um, does your writing, like when you're writing something, do you have a theme for it before you start writing, or do you intend for it to be part of like Latino, gay, I don't know, bears, whatever. I don't know what the category, but I'm gonna put up your Instagram link so people can check it out in a minute. But I'm Generation X. Yeah, I love books. I love books. I do. Give me good old paper.
Yeah. I like to think of myself as a pioneer in bear poetry.
That's a good one to have. Let me just remind everybody, we're watching Put It Together Conversations. I'm your host, Daniel G. Garza. My guest today is poet Gustavo Hernandez, and we're talking about his book, poetry, and we just gave some tips for younger writers and any age writers, because if you are there sitting and you have an idea and you want to write, it's never too late to put your words down. So make sure that you do that. This is about the time of the show where, there it is, where we offer some words of wisdom to our audience. So Gustavo Hernandez, what words of wisdom would you like to share?
Words of wisdom. I would say don't give up. Pursue whatever it is you want to do. And if you are and I think we covered this a little bit already, but if you're true to yourself and true to what you like and true to what you want to write, there is this is going to be like a sort of like words of wisdom from me, but also from someone that I admire. There's this songwriter named Kristen Hershen. She was the lead singer of Throwing Muses, and I remember reading her something that she wrote for like an intro to one of the albums or something, and she said something along the lines: if you are true to yourself and if you write what you want to hear, the outside world will either fall into place or it will disappear. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, because you just whether it does fall into place or whether it disappears, as long as you keep doing what you want to do, either way's fine.
Here are both of his links, so make sure that you go check them out either on his webpage or I'm telling you, folks, he's got a good Instagram. Go check out his Instagram. Go follow him. I've had the pleasure of having over 500 guests over my career in podcasting, and every once in a while, somebody comes along that again I just kind of like go, like you're reading me, like I haven't lived your experiences, I haven't been where you are, and I don't know the intention behind your poems, but there's been words in there that I'm like, that just reminded me of my mom, or
take your time. No, I understand.
that just reminded me of sitting with my sisters at the ranch with a cup of coffee and just soaking it all in. And as we get older, I just turned 50, and as we get older and the older generation starts going away, I am so honored that I found your book when I did, um, because it's keeping those memories of a family that's no longer here. It's keeping them alive for me. So I'm so grateful that you agreed to come on the show. And I hope that other Latinos, for those you don't have to be Latino to buy the book, so please buy the book regardless. Pero I'll say this: si eres Latino and you live here in the States, and every once in a while you just miss ese saborcito de Mexico, you miss your family a little bit, buy the book, read it, and I don't promise it, but I can guarantee that one of them is going to get to you. And like I said, I have it bookmarked. I have it bookmarked. because he sends you a bookmark first. You get a bookmark too. I got the bookmark. I have a bookmark, and I'll go back to it and just read it. And every time I read it, it just brings up another little. Depends on my mood. It just brings up another little flavor. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. We still have about 10 more minutes, so I'm not going away. But what would you like people to take away from your book? I guess what's your legacy? What's your destiny? I guess yeah, your legacy.
I think that this book has it served many purposes for me. Like, and hearing you talk about how you've connected with it, honestly, like that is the highest praise that you could give me, because this book is so intensely personal, that was one of my um, questions that I sort of had. How is this book going to connect with someone? Right? I'm writing my own experiences, and it's again so personal. Is it going to reach other people? Are they going to take anything from it? And hearing you talk about how you've connected with it is awesome, because that is something that I wasn't counting on. But now that I've heard people um, tell me that they've connected with it, it's just that, this book keeps surprising me. It was a way for me to, one, express myself, two, to honor my family's history, and honor to tell their stories, right? Because there are a lot of other people in this book. My dad, my mom, my one of my dear cousins who passed away, like my sisters, my brother, and I just think that if I hadn't written this book, those stories may not have lasted. Now there's something. Now there's, something's written down. And my parents, they told me so many stories of their time, growing up and just living life. And what if they hadn't told me those stories, right? They would be lost. And some of that, I mean, almost all that stuff is like, it's so precious, it's so beautiful and brilliant. So I think that one of the things that I love about the book too is that it's allowed me to be like one of my family's historians, right? And to keep telling those stories, and so that they're not forgotten. But again, I mean, just the fact that you connected with it, that makes me really happy.
My pleasure. This just popped into my head. It's like, for those of you, let me bring up the cover again so you can see it. Gustavo Hernandez, Flower Grand Thirst. It's a book that invited me into your world, and you had a chair waiting for me. And I had the chance to interview my dad several years ago for my podcast when it was still just audio. And he got to share some of his stories. Again, he's a ham, so he just told me all these stories. I knew some of them had been embellished for the audience, but um, that podcast is forever recorded, and my nephews can hear it, and my great nephews will be able to hear it. I wished I had interviewed my mom when she was able. She had Alzheimer's for a long time, but good for you for yeah. Oh, here we go. We have some. Will Gustavo be branching out into writing short films, movies, etc.?
I don't have plans for it, but you never know. I mean, creativity shifts over time. Um, and if someone's out there who wants to reach out, like I'm always willing to, entertain that too. Just
So,
we'll see where.
you can do Mexicans in your film. So I'm an actor too. I have no shame in promoting myself, but I'm not. No vergüenza.
Good.
Vergüenza. We have another comment for you. You also open the eyes of those of us who have not had those experiences and enable us to share in the emotions and the love. I second that. I second that. Again, it's just it's a I don't know how. If I say any more, I'm going to sound like I'm kissing your butt, but I probably am. But it is that. It's people are probably going, what? Because I don't gush about a lot of books, but it's that it feels comfortable. Like I said, it's like you opened your memory box and you're like, there's a chair waiting for you here. Like, come and sit down. And I had no problem just following you and going, oh yeah, I get that. I get where you're coming from. Like, I know that. I know the flavor of your words. Ooh, let's put that on a t-shirt. That sounds
Yeah,
nice. Um, that's my idea, folks. If you don't make the bumper sticker without
I
me.
know.
We have about 5 minutes to go. Anything that we didn't talk that you want to mention before we go?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think it's been such an enjoyable conversation. It feels like we've only been talking for like 10 minutes. Um, but yeah, and I think one of the comments that we had was that it shows people, like the book may show people who haven't had those experiences, what they're like, and I think that's an important thing too, is to be able to kind of step out of yourself and see what other people are going through, right? And yeah, for me, like telling this story, writing this book has it's allowed me to move on. I mean, it's like there's such a feeling of just being able to go forward now that this book is written. It's crazy to me. Like, I didn't know that that was going to happen either. Just like the emotional growth that was going to come from it, where it gave me closure from, as far as a lot of things, where it's like, okay, like these are the experiences, and some of the bad ones, like, they don't have to haunt you anymore. And your ancestors, like the people who have come and gone, are not gone really. Like, they are right here with you, and you can carry them with you to the next stages of your life. You can carry their lessons with you, um, in a way that's empowering as opposed to debilitating, right?
There's such a power for those of you that even if you've never thought about journaling and just writing down your thoughts, your dreams, your goals, even your, we talk about grateful list. Write that down. That has the potential to become so much more if you just give yourself permission to dream that big and realize that your words have so much power. And just like Gustavo said, when you share the most intimate thing, um, somebody out there is looking for that to be a symbol of their own hope and faith. So don't limit yourself. You just don't know who you're going to reach. Gustavo, it's been such a pleasure. Please come back whenever you want.
Anytime. Thank you.
I think it would be awesome to bring you back and read some more poems, or invite some of our guests to join us and maybe teach them a couple of things about writing. And
Sure.
so we can do. Plus, I look forward to like meeting you in person and grabbing a cup of coffee, some tacos or something.
That would be awesome.
You're
Yeah.
such a delight. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to put you in the green room for just a second. I'll be right back for you. For everybody watching, that was poet Gustavo Hernandez. If you missed this, go back and watch it. Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. Remember, we have shows every other week. You can't get away from us, folks. We've got 3 shows on the air right now. Wednesday, we got Christian and Daniel show. On Fridays, the Card Devo. And then on Saturdays, with 2 shows of Put It Together Conversations. And occasionally, we'll throw in a special 2 o'clock show. So make sure that you hit the notification buttons to get notified whenever a show comes on. Follow us on YouTube, because there you can also see my TikTok show. So if you're not on TikTok in the mornings, you should follow me on TikTok at the Card Devo. Every morning from 9 to 10, I have my Breakfast with the Comadres, where we do card readings and chit chat and words of wisdom. And then you can catch those on YouTube. So make sure you go follow me on that. If you have not heard about the book, because I talk about it every time, this is my book, Grumpy Bunny and the Colors Gang. Go check it out. It's a guided meditation book for kids, but it doesn't matter how old you are. You can still check it out. Go find it at any of these 5 establishments, soon to come out in Spanish. So keep your bunny ears open, because it's about to come in Spanish. And to all my friends in El Paso, I will be there for the book fair in September. So make sure that you buy your tickets. I'll give out more information as the date gets closer. For now, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank our guest, Gustavo, for being here. It is such a pleasure. Again, Put It Together Conversations, the show about folks where you come from, where you are now, and what the journey's been like. The idea is to motivate and inspire other people to go after their dreams and their goals. And we hope that today's show has inspired you. We will see you next week. Thank you for joining.